Today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most audacious games of the original PlayStation era. A game that not only pushed the hardware but fundamentally bent it to its will, creating a new blueprint for 3D adventures in the process. We're talking, of course, about Core Design's 1996 masterpiece, Tomb Raider. But this isn't just a retrospective. For our community of tech enthusiasts and nostalgic gamers, this is a forensic investigation. If you were like me, you probably spent hours trying to figure out how this game world was actually created and brought to life. In this video, we're going to answer the question, how did a relatively small team in Derby, England, working with a console that had only 2 megabytes of RAM and a processor that your 2007 iPhone could run circles around, make a world that felt so vast, so immersive, and a character who became a global icon? This is the story of the ingenious optimization of technical smoke and mirrors, and how Tomb Raider showed the world what was actually possible on the PlayStation. I'll never forget the first time I booted this game up. It was Christmas of 1996. The system was new, the DualShock controller didn't even exist yet, and I was navigating Lara with the original D-pad. I made it through the caves level, and there was a moment, a specific moment, a haunting musical cue that fades into the sound of dripping water and Lara's footsteps. In that moment, the blocky polygons and the chunky pixels didn't matter. I wasn't looking at a video game, I was there. And I think that feeling, that alchemy of turning technical limitations into pure atmosphere, is what we're really here to explore today. I know we look back with rose-tinted glasses, but playing it again today, what's fascinating is how the developers managed to work around the limitations of the hardware to create that sense of awe. So let's begin by understanding the canvas that Core Design was working with. The PlayStation was a revolution, but a constrained one. Its heart was the R3000A CPU, clocked at a then impressive 33.8 MHz. But the real star of the show for 3D graphics was the Geometry Transformation Engine, or GTE. This was a coprocessor hardwired to do one thing incredibly fast, handle the vector mathematics for 3D graphics. It could crank out tens of thousands of polygons per second, but there was a catch. The PlayStation did not have hardware support for floating point operations, which are essential for rendering 3D graphics. But it used various techniques to approximate these features and still provide acceptable 3D graphics. The PS1 can still perform fixed point arithmetic, and using software emulation, floating point numbers can also be computed, although at a slower pace. This is the root of so many of the PS1's signature quirks. That's why polygons often look like they're wobbling or warping, because the precision for their positions in 3D space was limited. The system was essentially making educated guesses, and sometimes those guesses were a little janky. Add to this a paltry 2 megabytes of main RAM and a mere 1 megabyte of video RAM, and you start to see the puzzle that Core Design had to solve on a budget of just £440,000. They weren't just building a game, they were building a 3D game on a machine that was still learning what 3D was. Before we dive into it further, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is always here for a quick retro gaming break whenever you need it. I appreciate your support, since it's the only way that YouTube will highlight my videos. The initial concept came from a young art school graduate named Toby Gard, who envisioned a game that mixed the first-person exploration of Ultima Underworld with the 3D characters of Virtua Fighter. He wanted to create an interactive movie, but one that wasn't restricted to pre-rendered video clips. The team, led by Gard and lead programmer Paul Douglas, knew they couldn't use any of Core's existing 3D engines for a project this ambitious. They had to build one from scratch. And their initial target wasn't even the PlayStation, it was the Sega Saturn, which, not coincidentally, debuted the first console release of this game. This decision fundamentally shaped the engine. The Saturn, for instance, only draws quadrilaterals or quads, which imposed a major constraint from the very beginning. And for months, the team struggled with the fundamental question, How do you get a character to interact with free-form 3D environments given the severe processing constraints? The breakthrough that Core came up with was the decision to build everything on a grid. This single choice made the entire project suddenly feasible. The game world was constructed from a series of rooms on a 3D grid, a design directly inspired by the multi-chambered layout of real-world Egyptian tombs, particularly the tomb of Tutankhamun. This grid-based system is the invisible skeleton that the entire game is built upon. This brings us to the most visible symbol of those constraints. Lara Croft herself. Ever wonder why Lara was so pointy? Her iconic triangle chest wasn't just a stylistic choice. It was a direct result of a brutally strict polygon budget. Lara's model is a masterpiece of minimalist engineering, built from the ground up by Toby Gard, using just over 300 polygons. As Gard himself noted, her chest was 2 triangles on either side and 2 quadrilaterals on the front, which was about as efficient as it could be done. He made a conscious trade. Less detail on her body allowed for more polygons on her head and face, ensuring that she had character. The developers at Core Design weren't just artists. They were architects of abstraction. They understood that in the low-poly world, silhouette was everything. By creating a distinct, recognizable shape, those blocky pigtails, the triangular torso, the long legs, they ensured that even in the darkest, most pixelated corridor, you could always tell it was Lara. This technical foundation had a profound impact on the gameplay itself, leading to what is now one of the most debated control schemes in history, the tank controls. Now, I know what you're thinking. We've all complained about them, but understanding the why completely reframes them. With the grid-based level design and fixed camera angles, a modern camera-relative control scheme would have been unplayable. Pressing forward would send Lara in a different direction with every camera cut, so they anchored the control to Lara herself. Forward was always forward from her perspective. This created a precise, almost chess-like movement system. This philosophy was a direct inheritance from the original Prince of Persia, a game the team cited as a major influence. Just like the Prince, Lara has a rigid set of moves with predictable outcomes. A standing jump always covers 2 tiles. A running jump covers 3. There's a deliberate delay between input and action, giving her a sense of weight and momentum. This turned platforming from a test of reflexes into a form of spatial puzzle solving, where success came from carefully planning out your route rather than twitch reactions. The clunkiness was deliberate. It was the only way to make the game work, and once you understood its logic, it gave you a pixel-perfect sense of control. Of course, a tomb wouldn't be very atmospheric if it were silent. The audio in Tomb Raider is another masterclass in working within its constraints. The PlayStation CD-ROM drive allowed for high-quality streamed audio, which is why the game's haunting, English classical music-inspired soundtrack is so memorable. Core's audio team was given a mere 3 weeks to compose the entire score. Lacking a budget for a live orchestra, they created the iconic pieces using synthesizers. For the choral piece, where the depths unfold, they even created recordings of their own breathing to simulate the sound of a real choir. But the sound effects were a different matter. They had to be stored in that limited 2 megabytes of main RAM. The sound designer was also on a tight deadline, with about a month to create the entire game's soundscape. This led to a very sparse but incredibly effective audio design. Unlike most games of the era, music doesn't play constantly. Instead, limited musical cues are triggered at specific dramatic moments. For the majority of the game, the only sounds are the echoing thud of Lara's boots on stone, the specific grind of a block being pushed, the fearsome growl of a wolf, and the chilling silence of ancient ruins. This silence was just as important as the sounds themselves, building tension and making the world feel immense and lonely. Now let's talk about the infamous draw distance, or more accurately, the fog. That thick, soupy fog that seems to just hang 20 feet in front of you in every outdoor area. It wasn't an artistic choice for mood. It was a brutal, necessary culling technique. The PlayStation simply couldn't draw the entire level at once, so the developers used distance fog to hide the pop-in. As Lara moved forward, the level geometry was literally being drawn and erased just beyond the veil of that fog. It was a clever way to mask the system's inability to render long distances, and ironically, it ended up adding to the game's mysterious, claustrophobic atmosphere, even in wide-open areas. You never knew what was lurking in that mist. The camera was another monumental challenge. With controllers lacking analog sticks, giving players direct control wasn't an option. Instead, Paul Douglas programmed a dynamic, intelligent camera system that had to react to any possible circumstance. It featured 4 preset angles that would seamlessly switch depending on Lara's position, often framing the action for cinematic effect, while ensuring the player always had a viable view for platforming. A huge part of making this all work was the proprietary software built in-house. Core's genius programmers created a revolutionary room editor that allowed the level designers to build and test environments in minutes, not hours. This was a game changer. Instead of waiting for a 3D studio render, they could output a room, explore it immediately, and iterate rapidly. Level design was a collaborative process, with monthly meetings where the team would discuss concepts for levels like St. Francis's Folly, brainstorming the themed rooms and their puzzles. Alongside this, they also created a unique tool called the Anim Editor that allowed them to animate Lara's movement in real time by hand. Think about that for a minute. All of her running, shooting, leaping, even her graceful swan dives and grisly death ragdoll motions were painstakingly animated 1 frame at a time by hand. Wow. And the reason that hand animation rather than motion capture was used is that Core wanted uniformity and precise control of her movements, which just wasn't possible with the motion capture technology of the time. These 2 pieces of software were, in the words of the team, 10 to 15 years ahead of themselves, and were arguably as groundbreaking as the game itself. They were instrumental in bringing the game to life. Real quick, if you enjoy this content, I've put a link in the description below of a playlist of all of my other videos that you might also enjoy, so check it out and stick around for a while. As we've seen from the interplay of combining all of the technical elements together, the custom engine, the low-poly character, the grid-based levels, the tank controls, the sparse audio, and others, it allows us to see the complete picture. Tomb Raider is a game that succeeded in spite of its limitations, and in fact, is a game whose identity is forged by them. Every single one of these technical compromises directly contributed to the unique feel, the precise gameplay, and the unforgettable atmosphere that we remember so fondly. Core Designs didn't have the power to create the realistic world like we see in modern-day games today, so they used every trick in the book to create a believable one. They turned the PlayStation's weaknesses into stylistic strengths, and the legacy of this technical achievement is immense. Tomb Raider was the start of an enormous franchise that defined the 3D action-adventure genre. It immediately connected with players, selling over 7 million copies and turning around the fortunes of its publisher, Eidos, from a $2.6 million loss before the game's release into a $14.5 million profit. It proved that a compelling character and the masterful use of a new system's architecture could triumph over its limited graphical power. For me, the ultimate testament to its design came years later, long after I'd moved on to the PS2 and beyond. I found my old PS1 memory card, plugged it in, and loaded up my save file. And there, in Croft Manor, with its blocky textures and chunky geometry, was that feeling again. The feeling of being in a place that shouldn't even be possible, crafted by developers who saw the walls of their technical prison not as barriers, but as a challenge to be overcome. They didn't just make a game for the PlayStation, they broke through what was possible at the time, and in doing so, they built a legend. What are your most vivid memories of the original Tomb Raider? Was it the first time you faced the T-Rex? The puzzle that stomped you for days? Or just the sheer atmosphere of those silent tombs? And what other games from the era do you think performed similar technical magic? Let's get that deep dive conversation started in the comments below. If you enjoyed this look into the tech behind the classic, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.